Most people move on from a single moment without realizing it ever mattered, but not Aria Brennan. And definitely not Evan Calder. The strange part was that neither of them ever talked about that night, yet both of them carried it quietly, like a bookmark in a chapter they never finished. It all began on a cold evening in a small coastal town where the wind always seemed to whisper secrets no one admitted out loud. Arya had returned for the first time in years, stepping back onto the familiar boardwalk with the same feelings she used to hide as a teenager, hopeful, nervous, and not quite ready to face the past she'd left behind. She hadn't expected to see Evan, especially not there, especially not standing under the same old street lamp that had flickered the night they last spoke, if you could even call what happened speaking. Back then, they were younger, quieter, and tangled in emotions neither knew how to name. There were no big declarations, no dramatic confessions, just a moment, soft, hesitant, suspended, when she thought he might say something more, when he almost did. Then someone called her name from the porch, and the moment slipped away like steam into cold air. Tonight, walking toward him felt like stepping back into a memory she'd never fully understood. Evan looked older now, not in a tired way, but in a steadier way, like the world had knocked him around a little, but he learned how to stand taller because of it. His hands were tucked into his jacket pockets, his breath drifting in faint clouds, and when he saw her, he froze. Not dramatically, not with shock, just with that quiet pause a person makes when their heart recognizes something before their mind does. Arya stopped a few feet away. "Evan?" Her voice came out lighter than she intended, almost like she was afraid the wind might carry it away before he heard it. He smiled, gentle, unsure, and way too familiar. "Didn't think I'd run into you tonight." Tonight. The same word he'd used years ago, that night, when he had asked if she was okay after he walked her home. That question had lingered in her chest for years, mostly because of the way he looked at her when he said it, as if he meant more than the words aloud. Arya's heart thumped once, heavy and slow. She wasn't sure what to say, so she looked out at the dark waves instead. The tide pressed against the wooden posts, rising and falling in a rhythm that felt too calm for the storm building in her chest. "I didn't know you'd moved back," Evan said softly. It's temporary," she replied, even though she wasn't sure how temporary it would be. "Just helping with my aunt's shop for a bit." He nodded, but his eyes stayed on her a little too long, as if he was searching for something he didn't know how to ask for. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was familiar, dangerously familiar. Arya swallowed. "So, how have you been?" There were thousands of things he could have said, but he only offered a quiet, different. Life's been different. She wanted to ask what that meant. She wanted to know everything. What he'd done, who had stayed in his life, who had left. But before she could speak, he glanced at the street lamp above them. "Funny," he murmured, "it still flickers." The light buzzed softly, dimming for half a second before brightening again, the exact way it had years ago. Arya let out a small breath. "You remember that?" Evan's eyes shifted toward her, warm and searching. "I remember more than you think." Her pulse jumped. He didn't say it like a confession, but it felt like one. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath, time stretching, air tightening, her heartbeat sounding louder than the waves. Arya opened her mouth, unsure what she was about to say, when suddenly Evan stepped 1 inch closer. Not enough to startle her, just enough to hint that he hadn't walked away from that old moment the way she thought he had. And before she could gather her thoughts, he said quietly, "Arya, there's something I should have told you back then." Her breath caught, because he said it in a way that made her feel like everything she thought she imagined might not have been imagined at all. But he didn't finish the sentence. Not yet. If you're enjoying this story so far, please like the video and subscribe for more heartfelt tales. Arya hadn't expected her heart to react the way it did, jumping, stumbling, reaching as Evan's unfinished sentence hung in the cold air between them. It felt like standing at the edge of something she wasn't sure she was ready to face, yet had been waiting for without knowing it. Evan didn't rush. He never did. That was one of the things she remembered most clearly about him, how he always took his time, how he always chose his words like they mattered. But tonight, he fell quiet again, eyes lifting briefly toward the moonlit clouds as if searching for courage he wasn't sure he still had. Arya took a slow breath, her fingers brushing the wooden rail beside her. She kept her voice gentle. "What were you going to tell me back then?" Evan's jaw tightened slightly, a sign she'd seen before, years ago, whenever he wasn't sure how honest he should be. "I was going to tell you that," he hesitated, "that I noticed, even when you thought no one did." Arya blinked. Noticed what? That you were carrying too much. His voice was quiet, steady. That you spent every day acting like you were fine, because that's what everyone expected from you, and I wanted to tell you it was okay not to be. Her breath left her in a soft exhale. There it was, the thing she'd never known he saw. Back then, she'd been trying so hard to hold everything together, school, her family, the pressure of leaving town someday, while pretending she wasn't scared of losing the very place she longed to escape. She never once imagined he saw through any of it. Arya stared out at the waves again, her throat tightening. "I didn't think anyone really looked at me that closely," she whispered. Evan shook his head gently. "I did." The simplicity of those two words hit her harder than she wanted to admit. It was strange how a small truth could feel heavier than the secrets she'd carried for years. But then he added, "And there's more, something else I should have said that night." She turned back toward him, heartbeat quickening. He took a careful breath, eyes lingering on hers. But then, just like before, he didn't continue. Instead, a familiar voice drifted down the boardwalk. "Arya, is that you?" She froze. Evan's shoulders tensed ever so slightly. Walking toward them was Mira Hartley, Arya's childhood friend who had the talent of appearing exactly when you wished she wouldn't. She wore a puffy coat, her hands wrapped around a cup of hot chocolate, steam curling up into the night. Mira lit up when she recognized Arya. "I knew I saw you. What are you doing out here?" And her smile flickered when she noticed Evan. "Oh, you two." There was a history there. Nothing messy, nothing dramatic, just the faint, awkward kind that comes from old misunderstandings and unspoken teenage rumors. Arya tried to keep her tone light. "Just catching up?" Mira nodded slowly, but her eyes flicked between them more than once. "Well, I'm headed to the diner. They're doing late-night pie again. You should come by before they run out." Arya offered a polite smile. "I might." Mira hesitated, her gaze lingering on Evan a moment too long, then gave a small wave and continued down the boardwalk. The moment she disappeared around the corner, Arya let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Evan slid his hands back into his pockets. "She still talks a lot," he murmured with a faint smile. Arya laughed, the sound soft, surprised. "Yeah, some things don't change." But then silence folded around them again, gentle, uncertain, and somehow heavier than before, because they both knew Mira's interruption had shifted the moment, pulled them slightly back from whatever Evan had been about to say. He studied her for a long second. We were talking about something important. Arya nodded. I know. I'm not avoiding it, he said quietly. I just want to say it right. She stepped a little closer, drawn by something she didn't want to name yet. Then say it when you're ready. Evan's breath lifted in the cold air. I might be ready sooner than you think. Her pulse stumbled, warmth curling through her chest despite the icy wind sweeping off the water. Before either of them spoke again, a sudden gust rattled the loose metal signs along the boardwalk, making Arya jump slightly. Evan reached out instinctively, touching her arm for just a heartbeat. A warm, steadying touch. One that felt far too familiar for two people who hadn't seen each other in years. Arya looked up at him, surprised by how close he suddenly was. And in his eyes, soft, earnest, searching, there was something unmistakable, something real, something he'd kept hidden for far too long. Then, in a low voice that nearly blended with the wind, he whispered, Arya, that night wasn't one-sided. I've been thinking about it too. The words hit her like the echo of a truth she'd always hoped for, but never dared believe. And before she could respond, he took one slow step toward her. For a moment, Arya couldn't breathe. Not because Evan was too close, but because the truth he had just spoken fit so perfectly into the quiet ache she had carried for years. It felt unreal, like stepping back into a memory only to realize it had been waiting for her all along. She steadied herself. What do you mean you've been thinking about it too? Evan didn't look away. He didn't fidget or laugh it off. He just held her gaze with a steady calm that sent a soft tremor through her. That night, he said quietly, I told myself it didn't matter, that whatever I felt, it would fade once life pulled us in different directions. But it didn't. Not really. Arya's pulse kicked harder. The boardwalk lights flickered in the distance, their glow reflecting off the water in gentle, trembling lines. Everything around them felt softer, quieter, as though the entire night leaned in to listen. She swallowed. That was a long time ago. Time doesn't erase everything, he replied softly. Some moments outlast it. Arya felt her breath hitch because she knew exactly what moment he meant. The walk home, the rare stillness of the street lamp, the way he had looked at her when he asked if she was okay, like he saw something beneath all the pieces she tried so hard to keep together. But she had convinced herself it was one-sided, a misunderstanding, a youthful illusion she needed to outgrow. Yet here he was, saying the opposite. He exhaled slowly. There's something else you should know. Arya waited, heart trembling with anticipation and fear. But just as he opened his mouth to continue, a distant call broke the silence. Evan, you still out here? The voice came from the pier, a deep, familiar tone. Evan winced slightly. That's my brother, he murmured. Arya blinked. You're still close with him? Evan nodded. Yeah, he needed help with some things this year, so I stuck around more than I planned. His brother's silhouette appeared near the edge of the pier lights, waving a hand as if trying to locate Evan. Evan held up a finger, signaling 1 minute. He turned back to Arya with a faint sigh. I should go see what he needs. Arya nodded, disappointment tugging gently at her chest even though she tried to hide it. Of course, family first. Evan hesitated, scanning her face. I'm not leaving because I want to. I just don't want him wandering around in the dark waiting for me. She smiled softly. Go, I get it. He studied her for a beat longer, as though memorizing the moment. Then, quietly, he said, Can I walk you home later? Her heart fluttered. You still remember where I live? His lips curved into a subtle, warm grin. I remember more than you think. Arya felt warmth rise to her cheeks, not from embarrassment, but from the simple sincerity in his voice. Before she could respond, he stepped back toward the pier. But halfway there, he paused and looked over his shoulder. Arya? Yes? There's something I never told you, something I should have said that night. I'll finish it when I see you later. Her breath caught again, because he meant it, because whatever he was holding back wasn't casual or small or something a person shared lightly. And she knew that once he said it, whatever it was, their relationship would never return to the comfortable, unspoken distance they'd kept for years. He disappeared toward his brother, leaving Arya alone beneath the flickering street lamp. She leaned against the rail, letting the cold sea air wrap around her. Everything inside her felt unsettled, hopeful, and terrified all at once. What if she had misunderstood all these years? What if he had felt the same things she had tried so hard to forget? A small memory surfaced, faded but still warm. The sound of Evan's footsteps walking beside her that night, the way he slowed down when she did. The gentle hesitation in his voice when he asked if she was okay, as though he cared in ways he couldn't admit. Maybe she wasn't the only one who had replayed that moment. Arya closed her eyes for a second, letting the truth settle. She didn't know what he planned to confess, but she knew one thing with quiet certainty. Whatever Evan had kept hidden all these years was no longer going to stay buried. And when he walked her home later, everything might finally change. Arya didn't go straight home. She wandered the boardwalk slowly, letting the ocean wind cool the storm building in her chest. Every step felt like she was walking closer to a truth she wasn't sure she was ready to hear, yet desperately wanted to. She found a bench near the edge of the pier, the wood old and a little weather-worn, but familiar enough to settle her nerves. From there, she could see the glow of the diner windows, groups of people passing by, and the shimmer of water reflecting the moon in soft, trembling lines. Her thoughts drifted, back to that night years ago, when everything could have shifted, if only one of them had spoken. She remembered how Evan had looked at her, eyes full of questions he never asked, sentences he never said. And she remembered how her heart raced, hoping he would take one more step forward, close the quiet space between them. But life had swept them apart. She left, he stayed, and the moment faded into something she taught herself to forget. Until tonight. Arya rubbed her hands together, trying to warm them. She didn't realize how much time had passed until she heard footsteps approaching, slow, familiar, unhurried. Evan. He stopped a few feet away, breath visible in the cold air, his expression softer than she'd seen in years. "Sorry it took a bit," he said quietly. "My brother needed help loading something into his truck." Arya smiled. "It's okay. I wasn't going anywhere." He seemed relieved by that. Good. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The wind brushed past, carrying the distant sound of waves against the rocks. Then Evan took a seat beside her, close but not too close, just enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. He rested his hands loosely on his knees. "There's something I've been trying to say," he began, "and I don't want to lose my nerve again." Arya braced herself, heart thumping. Evan let out a slow breath. "You asked what I meant earlier, about thinking of that night. The truth is, I didn't just think about it. I thought about you." Her lips parted slightly. "Evan?" He shook his head gently. "Let me get this out, please." She nodded. He continued, voice low but steady. "I kept telling myself it wasn't important, that we were young and you'd leave, and life would move us in different directions. But even after I convinced myself to forget, I never actually did." Arya's fingers curled around the edge of the bench. "There were so many times," he added softly, "when I wanted to reach out. Birthdays, holidays, random days when your name just showed up in my mind. I always stopped myself. I didn't want to bother you. I didn't want to open something that I wasn't sure you remembered." Arya inhaled shakily. "I remembered more than you think." That made him look up, really look at her. as if those words cracked open something inside him. He swallowed. Then maybe I should tell you the part I never said. She waited, breath held. Evan shifted slightly, turning toward her. That night, when we stood under that same flickering light, I almost asked you to stay. You what? I didn't mean forever, he said quickly, shaking his head. Just stay a little longer. Stay until I had the courage to tell you what I felt. Stay until I could figure out if what I thought I saw in your eyes was real. Arya's chest tightened painfully. And why didn't you? Evan exhaled, the sound soft and regretful. Because your ride called your name at the exact second I was about to speak, and you looked over your shoulder so fast, like you didn't want to get caught there with me. I convinced myself you didn't feel the same. Her eyes widened. That's not what happened. I know that now, he murmured. But back then, it felt like a sign, so I stepped back. And then you left town, and I told myself it was better this way. Arya pressed a hand to her chest, trying to calm her racing heart. I wasn't trying to get away from you. I was scared. I'd never felt that close to someone before. He stared at her, stunned by her honesty. You were scared? She nodded slowly. I didn't know if I was imagining everything, and I didn't want to embarrass myself by assuming you felt something too. Evan let out a quiet, almost disbelieving laugh, like he couldn't believe how much they had misunderstood each other. A moment passed, soft, fragile, healing. Then he whispered, Arya, I still feel it. Her breath caught. Every emotion she'd buried years ago surged back to the surface. But before she could say anything in return, a sudden shout echoed down the pier, sharp and urgent. Someone was calling her name. She turned, startled, heart jumping into her throat as she recognized the voice. Someone she hadn't expected. Someone who shouldn't have been there at all. Arya stood from the bench so quickly she barely felt her feet touch the ground. The voice calling her name cut through the calm night like a sudden gust of cold air. Arya! Hey, there you are! It was Theo Carlin, a family friend, someone who had known her since childhood, someone harmless, but someone who always seemed to show up at exactly the wrong time. He jogged up the pier, waving as if he hadn't just shattered the most fragile moment she'd had in years. Evan rose beside her, his expression unreadable, calm on the surface, but carrying something wounded beneath it. Not jealousy, not frustration, just a quiet, unmistakable ache. Theo reached them, slightly out of breath. Your aunt's been looking for you. She thought you got lost out here or something. Arya blinked, trying to steady her heartbeat. Oh, right. I should probably head back. Theo smiled. I can walk you. It's late. Before she could respond, Evan spoke, voice even, polite, but firm. I was going to walk her home. Theo glanced between them, eyebrows lifting. Oh, okay, sure, just wanted to help. Arya managed a grateful smile. Thanks, Theo. I'll stop by in the morning. He nodded and headed off, quickly swallowed by the boardwalk shadows. When he was gone, silence returned, gentle but heavy. Evan looked at her, the faintest tension lingering in his jaw. You don't have to walk me home, she whispered. But her voice betrayed her. It wasn't uncertainty, it was hope. Evan shook his head once. I want to. They left the pier slowly, their footsteps soft against the old wooden boards. The air was cold enough to make breath visible, but Arya barely noticed. Her thoughts were everywhere, caught between the past, the present, and the words Evan had spoken only moments ago. He felt it too. Back then, now. They reached the quiet road leading toward her aunt's house. The street lamp flickered again, the same one that had witnessed their almost confession years earlier. Arya stopped walking as the light buzzed overhead. Evan stopped too. Neither spoke. For a long moment, they simply stood there, letting the weight of everything unsaid settle between them one final time. Then, gently, slowly, Arya turned toward him. "You said you still feel it," she whispered. "What did you mean?" Evan moved one step closer, leaving only a small space between them. "It means I never forgot you, or that night, or the way you made everything feel calmer, realer." He paused, breath unsteady. "And when you left, I thought I'd imagined the whole thing, but seeing you tonight, everything came back like it never left." Arya's heart pressed against her ribs. "I felt it too," she admitted, words trembling out of her before she could stop them. "Every part of that night stayed with me. I never understood why, until now." Evan's eyes softened in a way that made her chest ache. "Arya, I think I cared about you more than I knew how to say back then." "And now?" she asked quietly. He hesitated only for a second. Then he said, with the gentlest certainty she'd ever heard, "Now I know I do." The words settled over her like warmth breaking through cold air. Not rushed, not dramatic, just honest. Arya stepped closer, so close she could feel the steady rhythm of his breathing. Her voice trembled softly. "I care about you too. I always did. I just didn't know what to do with it." Evan let out a breath that sounded like relief finally finding a place to land. "Can I tell you the part I never said that night?" he asked quietly. She nodded. He took a moment, gathering the courage he'd waited years to find. Then, in the softest tone the night had heard, he whispered, "I wanted to stay in that moment with you, longer than made sense, longer than I admitted, and I wanted you to know you weren't alone." Arya felt her eyes sting, not with sadness, but with something tender and long overdue. "You should have said it," she whispered. "I know," he replied, "and I'm saying it now because I don't want to lose another chance." The street lamp flickered once more, casting warm and cool light across their faces in alternating waves. And for the first time in years, Arya didn't step back. She didn't hesitate. She didn't let fear steal the moment. Instead, she breathed in, steady and sure. "Evan, you're not going to." He looked at her with a quiet, hopeful disbelief, like he had waited half his life to hear those words. They stood there for a long moment, letting the truth settle, letting the past fall away, letting the night become the beginning of something new. Finally, Evan reached out, slowly, respectfully, and took her hand, warming her cold fingers with his own. Arya didn't pull away. For the first time, they didn't miss the moment. They stepped into it together. Whatever happened next, they would face it without the weight of fear or unfinished words. The night that once separated them had finally brought them back.